A very, very good afternoon. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. And for the second time this week, a warm welcome to the island of Milos, where my Greek odyssey continues. Last week was Sifnos. Before that, we were in Achia Messini. Before that, Monimvasia. Before that, in Athens. And I'll be back in Athens next week for the final two shows of the Greek trip before heading back to South Africa. But for today, I'm looking out over an island that is, well, by Greek standards, it's very overcast. By sort of English or Scottish or Welsh standards, it's a glorious summer's day, but there are flickers of cloud. In fact, there was actually a bit of rain, and that rain has influenced the show slightly because one of our guests, Kyros Milos, who is going to be joining us today, is unable to because the rain has caused havoc with his harvest. So no Kyros today, but we do have our other guest still with us. In fact, we've got him for the entire show, and I'm very excited to have somebody this week from the north of Greece, from the region of Drama, Macedonia, and somebody whose wine I got to taste for the first time last night. And on the basis of one bottle, I shall declare his wine very nice, but I'll find out some more both from him, and next week I'm going to be looking out for some more of his wine, and I shall update you across our social media channels. What I can tell you is very similar to what I've been saying over the last few weeks, but with even more experience in the last few days, is the range and the excitement of Greek wine continues to delight. And what we've been doing quite a bit of over the last week or so is trying some Greek red wine at a slightly more chilled temperature, and wine that's not out and out light, not completely Pinot Noir Cinsault in style, but instead wine that has got, let's go with medium bodied, heading into that more sort of Merlot or lighter Syrah kind of territory. Now, normally when you get wine like that down to a colder temperature, it pronounces the tannins a bit more. You put a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon on the fridge for too long, and it just gets a little bit spiky on the palate. We're not finding this. Granted, we're not drinking the stuff freezing cold. We're just taking some of the heat out of it. And on a hot summer's day at the back end of a Greek summer, it's worked out rather nicely. So the Greek indulgence continues, and in just a moment, I'll be welcoming in this week's guest. But before we do that, let's find out what's been happening on the wine scene over the last few days. Well, let's kick off with the Sternberg Garden Party that's coming up in a few weeks' time. This has become a very, very popular event in Johannesburg. It's out near Lanseria, out near the airport, and they have a fabulous afternoon. There is wine on tap, there's a huge picnic, there is music going. It is the Sternberg Garden Party. You can head down to the Sternberg website and get through to an event that will, understandably, for the Constantia Valley, celebrate Sauvignon Blanc. There'll also be plenty of bubbles, and the Sternberg Cup Classique has become a bit of a standard setter from the Constantia Valley over the last few years, and all the more so with Alunda Basson taking over as cellar master or mistress and running the cellar, of course, having plenty of experience from her time making bubbles out at Pongratz. But I think you'll also discover some different wine, in particular some of the reds of Sternberg. They're one of the few people to make a Nebbiolo, which will be worth trying. That day as a whole, though, is going to be a lovely afternoon. So the Sternberg website, and that should point you in the right direction for an afternoon of wine-fueled indulgence. Speaking of wine and indulgence, would you like to know a little bit more? Well, here is your opportunity. You'll remember a couple of months ago, Spencer Fondomier, the head of the South African Sommeliers Association, was on the show talking about some of the work that they were doing as sommeliers, and there's been a real lift in the standard of sommelier education in South Africa, the ability to have a conversation at not just the very top restaurants with a sommelier and get a good understanding of what's on the wine list, why it's on the wine list, and how it's likely to complement either your palate or your meal, or ideally both. And that is because there's been a lot of time and effort put in to sommelier training. This continues at Stellenbosch Wine Routes, supporting the inaugural boot camps. These are in September and October. You can find out more details from the Sommeliers Association website. But if it's something that you'd like to get into, it includes both an online and a live component. Online wherever you are, live down in Stellenbosch, drinking wine, learning more about it. What is not to love about that opportunity? Well done, Stellenbosch Wine Routes, for that. Then the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival. I'm not going to make this one, sadly. I only land back from Greece lunchtime on the 3rd, and I'm just too late to get the connecting flight down to Durban. But if you are in Durban, we were at the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival in Johannesburg just a couple of months ago. It was sold out. It was a terrific party, wonderful music, lots of splendid wine, all on sale either on the day or to get delivered to your home, and a great selection of street food as well. Just a terrific party. It was pretty laid back in Joburg. I'd imagine it'll be even more so down in Durban, and you can get tickets there through web tickets for the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival Durban on the 3rd of September 2022. And then to give you a heads up for two things you're going to find out about on the show on Monday. The first of those will be tickets going on sale for the Pick and Pay Wine Club members premiere of Blind Ambition, the story of the four Zimbabwean sommeliers who took France by storm. It is a documentary that's been dubbed The Cool Runnings of Wine. It has been showcased all over the world. It's won a number of awards. One of those four sommeliers is the Zimbabwean Joseph Dafana. Joseph and I will be hosting the premieres in both Johannesburg and Cape Town. Cape Town the 8th of September, Johannesburg Friday the 9th of September. Those tickets will be on sale on Monday. There are only about 120 tickets available, so get hold of them as quickly as you can. And then also on Monday, look out for an even smaller event, a much more expensive one. Roland Pienz and I will be hosting a Bordeaux dinner. Think 1995 Chateau Petrus. Think 1967 Haute Lafitte. Think a whole pile of some of the greatest Bordeaux wines in history. And we'll be hosting a very small charity dinner, just 40 people, with Harold Brescher-Schmidt down in Cape Town. And that is coming up in October. Look out for details on the show on Monday. Now's a good time there to phone that bank manager and tell him you're looking to throw a large sum of money at a good cause and drink some vintage Bordeaux for the pleasure. All right, speaking of pleasure, Greek wine has given me a great deal thereof over the last few weeks, and I've got to meet some really cool winemakers, and everyone I've made has been a combination of passionate about what he or she is doing and excited about both the present and the future of Greek wine. And I suspect my guest today will be very similar. I think the winery is pronounced Oenops, but I need to make sure. So let's bring our guest in. Nikos, a very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Hey, hi Dan, Kalmera. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss about Greek wine, about Greece. Have to say I'm pretty jealous of you being now in Milos and me being in Harvest, but that's life.
I want to talk to you about that harvest in a second, but let me make sure I have my pronunciation right first. Tell me how we pronounce the name of the wine, and then what does it mean? What is the history? How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, so in Greek, it's Oenops. In Latin, it should be something like Oenops. It's Oenops. It's a word that we have borrowed from ancient Greek, from Homer. It means the one who has the face of wine. It's a word that I find very powerful and that comes well with our project.
And it's a project that hasn't been going for too long. Am I right? 2015, that's when you got up and running?
Actually, yeah, 2015 was late of December that we started, but I would say that it's 2016, the first vintage that we have as Oenops. It is a project that it's relatively unique in Greece and relatively common in South Africa. What we do here is that we own no grapes, no vineyards, but we are looking for all vineyards through the north part of Greece mainly, of indigenous varieties, of Greek varieties, and we are searching for cool climates and, as I said, all vineyards.
Tell me about your own wine story, Nikos, before we look at some of the wine that you make and your current harvest. I'm guessing that you didn't just wake up one day in 2015 and say, "Right, I'm going to stop being a plumber or an accountant or a taxi driver, and I'm going to make some wine." Well, what is your own wine history, wine background?
Yeah, actually, wine came to my life a little bit after my studies as a chemical engineer. I found myself at Bordeaux studying enology as a challenge to myself, because I found enology a very challenging science, because there are many parameters that you have to take in control in order to get to a result. That was the first impression. The thing is that being in France, being in Bordeaux, and studying enology without speaking any French was not so easy. So this helped me, as I didn't understand a lot of the things that was going on between friends, and also a lot of hard work in studies. This helped me watching and feeling. So I became very passionate about winemaking. I visited a lot of wineries. I talked a lot of winemakers. Came back to Greece in 2006. Worked for a winery here in Drama. That became very popular, and I became the CEO of the company, and I left that job in 2015, and started Oenops 1 year later as an idea that came up later.
It's a big call to make, to move on like that. It was one that I think has worked out for you, judging by the amount of your wine I've seen around. How frightening was it? How tough was it to set up a brand new project just 6-7 years ago?
Yeah, the thing is that when I left my previous job, I was not thinking of Oenops. I didn't have Oenops in mind. So I had quite a few proposals for collaboration. I started working as a consulting winemaker, and there I saw that we have all these beautiful vineyards, all these beautiful growers that trying to make the best out of it. So this way came the idea of Inox, and since the idea came to my head, I had no fear, because I always try to make one step by time. So even though that Inops moves pretty fast, faster than expected, we had a lean start, and we are going step by step. So no
You
fear.
sit you sit, Nikos, in what is now a pretty established wine region. Tell me a bit about Drama and about what makes it a good place to produce wine.
So Drama, actually, it's a known place since the ancient years. It's considered to be the place that Dionysus, the god of wine in Greece, in mythology, used to pass most of his time. Uh, Also, there is some historic notes I have found, like one at the 11th century, that a well-known, well-respected geographer came to the area, and he noted that he was very impressed by the wealthiness of the people and the vineyards. All this carried also through the years that Greece was under the Turkish, and the thing is that it changed for some years in the early 20th century, because when we have the exchange of population between Greece and Turkey, there have been a lot of people, Greeks from Turkey, that came back. And in the next years, although these people may love winemaking and vineyards, they had to rip them off, because they had to make something more profitable, to survive. So Drama makes a gap over the next years. with not a lot of vineyards, and then it restarts in the late 80s, and in only 30 years it became one of the most popular regions in Greece, because it has for me a unique geography. It is a pretty cool area that is surrounded by big mountains. You have some cooling winds from two exit or enter points, and this provides big differences in the temperature of the day and the night. And as you know, this is a privilege for the vineyards. So I believe this is the first and main reason that drama became so known so fast the last years.
It's also an area, Nikos, from what I've seen, that seems to have a fair number of pretty old vines. Age is quite common in Greece. We were looking at some olive trees last week that were hundreds of years old. I think there are also a few yayas and papous who were several hundred years old in the village as well. Things seem to age very well in Greece. The older vineyards, is that a big feature of Rama, Macedonia? And how important is it for your winemaking?
Unfortunately, in Drama, we don't have a lot of old vineyards. I would say like the oldest will be like 30 or 35 years old. The thing is, there are pretty much in the north part of Greece. You may find some good Xinomavro. You know that you can find many Assyrticos that are really old, and in the islands in general, or in some mountainous areas. You know, that's very important to work with. For me, it's one of the most important things to work with old vineyards, with old vines, because you know this is a great challenge, first of all, for the winemaker, because when you have all this balance on the vine, then you have to put a lot of work not to ruin it, you know, in the winemaking, and this is a beautiful challenge. Also, I believe a lot that old vines are resisting a lot in the climate change. So in general, it's a huge privilege to work with them. And in Oenops, we have vines from 30 to 95 years old that we are working with.
Yeah, so by South African standards, there's some pretty old vines and ones to be proud of, ones to put to good use, which you do, as I discovered with the wine I had with dinner last night. I'm going to talk about some of that wine in a second. Before we do that, though, tell me about this current harvest. A few of the winemakers I've spoken to have suggested that the recent rain hasn't been helpful. Some of the images on the news last night of floods all over the country can't have helped some of the winemaking areas. How difficult has this harvest been for you?
Yeah, it's a pretty challenging harvest for the varieties that are precoce, that we harvest early. But in general, because we are working with a lot of varieties that are later ripening, it's a good thing. When you don't have, of course, flood, that you have a rains of 10 millimeter or 15 millimeter. It has been a good thing for some regions and a challenging thing for some other varieties.
And of course, as I mentioned earlier, one of our guests couldn't make it on the show today. Milos, struggling with the harvest with a lot of rain causing havoc. He was trying to get some Chardonnay harvested today. He is, of course, at a different part of the country, but the winemaking community, Nikos, that I've met, certainly in my 3 weeks here so far, has been fairly close-knit. You seem to know each other fairly well, support each other fairly well. And I also get the sense that that's been one of the reasons that Greek wine has improved a lot over the last maybe 10, 15 years, a lot more working together, a lot more of a common goal as Greek winemakers. Does that apply to you, to your winemaking community? Is that a reflection of the relationship amongst Greek winemakers?
I totally agree, Dan. I believe that Greek winemakers now are closer than ever. There are a lot of discussions. There are people that are enjoying the wine of the other, but I believe this also could be in a more global base, because being a winemaker means that you have a nature of trying, of tasting, of exploring, and that's a beautiful part of our work, I believe.
It's been lovely to see, and it's a lot of those relationships that have allowed me to meet people like Nikos, as other winemakers have made introductions. In fact, this introduction came from Yannis Vasaltis, Yannis Aded Vasaltis in Santorini, who'll be with me on the show in Athens next Thursday, and he is famous for his Assyrtiko. What about your particular varietals up in the north of Greece? What really lends itself to making good wine? What are the standout grapes for the region of Drama, Nikos?
So, first of all, Yannis, he's a great winemaker and a great friend to me, and I have to thank him for introducing me to you. In general, Drama is a region that, as I told, has lost a lot of the vineyards that it used to have. So when people started investing again in vineyards and winemaking, they started with some blends of international with indigenous varieties. So Drama, it's pretty known for a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Assyrtiko, and some other blends in reds like Cabernet Merlot, Georgitico, or Syrah Georgitico. It's a place that they have. There is amazing viticulture and winemaking teams. In general, for Oenops, as I told you, we are working with indigenous varieties, not only from Drama, but from the area of Macedonia, Thrace, Thessaly. So we are focusing in varieties like Malagousia, Assyrtiko, Viviano, and Rhoditis for the whites. And from the reds, we have quite a few vineyards: Xinomavro, Limniona, Mavroudi, Mavrodaphne, some other grapes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Assyrtiko in particular, simply because it's both a grape a lot of South Africans know, and it's one a number of our winemakers are starting to plant. And a lot of the Assyrtiko that certainly I've tried in the past, that I know a lot of South Africans have tried, has been that dry, lean, mineral-driven Santorini style, the type that Yannis makes and makes so well. In fact, it's now on sale in small amounts in South Africa and never lasts very long. But if I'm looking at the wine I'm drinking now, this one comes from the Messini area. This is the Psarouris. It's a very different style of Assyrtiko, Nikos. It's a far fruitier style, a very fruit-forward wine that lacks some of the precision of a style of Yannis's. What sort of style of Assyrtiko do you make, and can you dictate it, or is your terroir telling you what kind of Assyrtiko you should make?
That's a great question and discussion in general. I have been working with Assyrtiko since 2005, a little bit before my return in Greece, my permanent return in Greece. And I have worked a lot with Assyrtiko. I used to make one single varietal. I had it in a blend. Now we have it in the blend in Apply, and also for a winery that I am consulting. We have Assyrtiko as a monovarietal. It's a grape that I really love. The thing is, when you take Assyrtiko outside of Santorini, you have to have in mind that you are not going to make an Assyrtiko like the one of Santorini. It's a fantastic variety that it can adapt itself in either the soil or the mesoclimate or the microclimate of the region. So for me, what is important in Assyrtiko and in every variety in general is for a winemaker to read all the data that he can take from the soil and the microclimate, and to adapt himself to the vine growing depending on what he has. Then, when we take the best out of the grape, then we have to translate that in a good wine, in an authentic wine, in a beautiful wine. So in terms of Assyrtiko, we have made a lot of experiments. We had worked a lot with the stress, We have worked a lot with the foliar management, in the winemaking also. I would say that you have to follow the what you have as a terroir and as a microclimate. You have to follow that and how can I say, present it.
Which leads to a question of how the rest of the world sees Assyrtiko and the challenge that may or may not present to you. If I think of the Pinotage grape in South Africa, which many people kind of didn't like for a long time because they'd seen one particular style, and that kind of defined Pinotage for South Africa for a long time, despite the fact that we're making lots of different varieties. The story of Assyrtiko is very different in that people have discovered Assyrtiko and really, really liked it, but in many cases, outside of Greece, they've discovered Assyrtiko from Santorini, or maybe more recently from somewhere like Tinos, where the style is not dissimilar. How then does it challenge you as a winemaker if you are selling Assyrtiko, let's say, in America, and I know you export wine to America, where you bring wine in from a different area, and so it's going to have a slightly different style. Are people expecting everything to taste like Santorini, or have you been able to tell the story that Assyrtiko is a grape that's got these different dimensions and that can be expressed in different ways?
Yeah. Of course, Santorini has been made abroad, known mostly from Santorini because it's a huge brand, Santorini in general. When we started Oenops, I didn't want to be in a single varietal. Didn't work with a single varietal Assyrtiko, as a respect to a partner that I consult him for his own Assyrtiko, so I didn't want to have two different Assyrtikos. The thing is, I believe that in general the market is open to taste the same variety in different style. Of course, Santorini is a very distinctive, has a very distinctive character, but as you said, there is Tinos. There are other places that also have, and other wineries that have great expression of Assyrtiko. The thing is, when we serve the grape and when we focus in offering the best quality for the price that we are asking, I believe there are always opportunities.
Well, let's steer away slightly from it as a single variety and talk about the wine I had for dinner last night, because it put a big smile on my face, with one exception. Unfortunately, everybody else at the table liked the wine just as much as I did, so I didn't get quite as much as I would have liked, Nikos. But what I did was a delight, and it was a coming together of Assyrtiko with Malagousia, and I think it was some Vidiano, if memory serves. Tell me a little bit about this. Sorry, no, it was Roditis. Correction. Tell me a little bit about this white blend. That's it on the left there at Restaurant Ergina in just outside of Placha in Milos. Tell me about the white blend and what makes this wine particularly special, especially when it goes with something like that for lunch. Great.
First of all, the wine, the name of the wine is Apla. Apla means simply in Greek. This is a family of blends of indigenous varieties. So the white, if it was 2021, it's Assyrtiko, it's Malagousia, Assyrtiko, and Vidiano. If it was 2020, it is Malagousia, Assyrtiko, and Roditis. 2021 was the first vintage that we had Vidiano instead of Roditis in the blend. So the blend actually, as you said, for us, the Apla is a wine for every moment of the day, for every day of the week, and it's a wine that we want, to easily, the one glass lead to another, and one bottle lead to the second one. We want to be enjoyable, although it needs a lot of work behind it, because, for example, this wine, it's a result of 30 different vinifications. Each plot, for us, it's one lot. So it's 30, 32, 29. The 2021 was 30 different vinifications. The idea of this wine is, as I told you, to be easily consumptive, easily for everybody, to be enjoyable, but also to have, but also, but also to have. Sorry for that, but also to have the depth to support food and someone who said something more. So it's a great partner for a typical Greek or Mediterranean cuisine, because it can be matched with a lot of things like the fish we had, or seafood, or salads, or fruits, whatever.
It's also wine in a bottle at restaurants, and that might sound fairly self-evident. Of course, you go to a restaurant, you find wines in bottles, and yet if I go back just 10 years when I was first coming to Greece, especially to the islands, and because wine would generally be a house wine. It was grassi and it was kokino, it was aspera. You basically got a very simple wine. An actual wine list was not something I saw very often. And just in this decade, I've seen that change dramatically. And to me, that says, yes, there are certainly lots of tourists coming who want to buy wine, want to understand it, want to know more about it. But it also says that there's maybe been a shift in the Greek understanding or approach to drinking wine out at dinner, where it's not simply a carafe of whatever the table wine is, but it's having a look, appreciating where is the wine from, what varieties do we like, that the consumer base, the customers in Greece are getting a better understanding of an appreciation of wine and rewarding the kind of effort that people like you are making.
Yes, Dan, that's huge. And I believe, as you said, that the last decade has been very important in this direction. Greek people, Greek Horeca has started working with Greek wine, with the winemakers, and that's very important because at the same time, as you said, someone who's not familiar with Greek wines or Greek varieties can easily find a wine of his taste at a restaurant or a bar in any of the islands, in any of the other cities that you may go. And that was not the story 10 or 15 years ago.
It certainly wasn't. As I mentioned on the show a few times, my first Greek wine experience was my wife's uncles giving me their wine from the Chorio, which they'd taught themselves to make in plastic buckets in their garages. So I'm very glad that things have headed in this direction. We've mentioned that white blend. Tell me about some of the other white varieties that you are focusing on, and what, from a white perspective, you feel defines the wine offering from Oenops.
So we have another family of wines that are single varietal, and there we have two whites. It's the one is Viviano, which is a grape I really believe in, I really like, and we have a great work on Viviano. And Kidonitsa, it's another grape that I believe, and we started like 3 years ago working with it. But Viviano is one of the grapes that I see to be very important in the future. And
you've also got some Kidonitsa in there, which I've had a little bit of over the course of the last few weeks. And then is it Limnoina? Is that correct?
Limnona, it's a red variety. It's another variety that I really like. It's a very elegant one. It comes from Thessaly. We're working a lot with slopy vineyards because Kidonitsa likes a lot poor soils and not humidity, not heavy soils. Yeah, there are wines. The thing is that in this wine, as I told you, we are adopting our winemaking. For example, when we started with Limnona, I found it so elegant, at the limit of being very fragile. So for that reason, I started working only with amphoras. Then, as our barrels became older, we put also some 10% of barrels. Then in 2020, we started also working with concrete because we felt safe with the porosity that was going to be nice. So now we have a wine, Limnona, for example, that it results out of 9-10 different vinifications for 6,000 bottles. Vidiano, it's 16 different vinifications in amphora, in 6 hectoliter barrels, in concrete tank, in stainless steel, different vinifications that we follow, spontaneous fermentation that we follow, because we want to explore the variety, but also to understand it better for each plot it's coming from.
There's also, as well as a slightly old school feel with the amphora, a big focus on sustainability. If I look at your Zino Mavro, which is Zino Mavro, very clever piece of naming there. It's a wine that's got minimal interference. You've really taken a step back as a winemaker and let the wine tell its own story. How important is that approach, that organic, that sustainable approach of farming to you? And is that the case across Greece? Is organic, sustainable, biodynamic wine farming very much the approach of the majority of Greek winemakers?
I wouldn't say that. I believe we're starting to work more and more with that. In terms of the Xenoma Raw and the Rhoditis, there are two wines that come from the oldest vineyards. The challenge that we put to ourselves was to make a wine the way our ancestors used to produce them, without using anything that they couldn't use, but at the same time blending it with the know-how that we have together to today. So we use, as you said, no sulfites, no enzymes, no yeasts, nothing. Everything by hand, pisage manuel, everything by hand. And then we leave the wine. It's a hands-off vinification, but at the same time, it needs a lot of work to be, not obvious. It will be, how do you say that? To be someone that you cannot see. It needs a lot of work to be out of the skin.
It is a grape. We're starting to see a little bit of in South Africa, some Zino Mavro. There's also some Zino Mavro in your rosé, and that's another Greek wine story that I've really liked seeing grow. Rosé for so long, really the reserve of the south of France, but the rest of the world has found spaces in rosé. South Africa very much amongst them, but often using the French approach. Lots of Grenache and Syrah and lots of the standard grapes. You, like all of your wines, have used a very Greek focus, and you've created a Zino Mavro-led rosé. Tell me about this wine, but also about how Greece is reacting to rosé and if it is becoming a wine that is gaining in popularity.
Of course, Greece is following the trend of the rosé. The worldwide trend of the consumption of rosé, and in general, in the winemaking has been some changes. So more and more people come to the Provence style rosé. For us, working with Greek varieties was a beautiful challenge, and for the Apla Rosé, Xinomavro, Limnona, and Mavroudi are three varieties that are contributing to a beautiful result. We make direct pressing, we make no saignée, because we want to preserve all the elegance, but at the same time we are working in very low temperatures in the reception, so our pressings are pretty long in order to gain or to take all the qualities for the mouth, because rosé for me is a passepartout wine for Greek or Mediterranean cuisine. Is a wine that you've been to Greek tables with family, that it's going to be for everything, from the salad to risotto or to pizza or to lavera, like gemista, foods that we have in our culture. In general, rosé, it's a beautiful thing to make as a winemaker, because you have to play also a lot with the eye. I say that white and red are mostly nose and mouth, but in the rosé, as you say, you have more the eye, the vision.
And it's one I'm seeing on more and more tables at the restaurants I've been going out to. Plenty of people ordering Greek rosé, and the smiles that resulted suggested they were happy with their choice. I mentioned earlier on in the show, Nikos, that there are a number of South African winemakers who are planting Greek grapes, some with great enthusiasm, some a little more tentatively, but seeing how they work out and planning for the future. You've got a great selection of historic Greek grapes that you are working with. For South African winemakers watching this, what are the grapes that are fairly easy to work with, that are pretty rewarding, that don't ask you too many questions? And what are the ones that are really hard work? What are the ones that have you falling asleep in tears at night thinking, why on earth did I decide to try and plant this?
That's a fantastic question. I have to say that I'm very happy knowing that South African winemakers work more and more with Greek varieties. And I'm really looking forward to taste anytime I have the chance. I'm looking forward for Sadi from Jordan to see the results. The thing is, for example, Asitico, as I told you, I believe it can be planted everywhere. It can adopt itself everywhere. As long as you have a good vine-grown approach and understanding the grape, you want to understand the grape in each parcel. I believe it's easy. I would say easy to cultivate. Xinomavro, it's easier than Agorgitico to cultivate. I would say that most of the Greek varieties, the majority of Greek varieties are not so difficult. Why is that? Because they have been adopted to heat. They have been adapted to the absence of water. So this is a good thing. Also have to tell you that for us, for example, working with Greek varieties in Greece, which is a hot place, we have alcohol levels of 12.2 to 13.1 or 2. Most of our wines are less than 13, which is important, taking in consideration that the last decade was also a decade that we all know the temperature came a little bit up and the maturation came a little bit earlier in total. I don't know if you see that in South Africa, but for me, the last 10 years has been a great thing to know that it becomes earlier and earlier every year, the maturation.
I think from the alcohol perspective, more with South Africa, there's definitely a trend of people appreciating wines that are a little lighter across the board. So not just big, heavy, broad-shouldered Bordeaux-style blends, but also wines that are made a little lower in alcohol. And that's been a trend, I think, not just in South Africa. So it clearly extends to Greece as well. And there are some nice parallels. If you get the chance, Nikos, next Thursday, we will have Gary Jordan from Jordan, as well as Chris Molyneux from Molyneux Wines, who are both producing Assyrtiko. In fact, the Molyneux released South Africa's very first Assyrtiko just 2 weeks ago. So we'll be chatting to them about their wines. And I'd like to put a tough question to you just to wrap up. And it's been an absolute delight spending some time with you, and I really appreciate it, Nikos. But I'm going to put our friendship at risk with a tough question or two just to finish off. Just from your sense, I think Greek wine is in a really cool, really exciting space. And I've watched it from 10 years ago where the whites were very good and the reds are, I'm not so sure, to now the whites being fantastic and a lot of the reds closing that gap. But I think there's still a lot more to come from Greek wine. For you, what's most exciting about Greek wine at the moment, but also where have you got challenges? Where do you think Greek wine needs to do better?
That's a great question, and I can assure you that our friendship will go on. It's a beautiful question. Thank you. Well, a thing that I really like is the one that you said before, that Greek winemakers now working more and more together. We have more and more young people getting in the business, young winemakers. The market, I believe, it's more world. How can I say? World expanded than ever. So people now understand mostly things that are not based in the local area, but around the globe. More and more people are working with Greek varieties, which I believe it's very important for us and for the varieties too. Beautiful challenges that I see is that we have a lot of work to do with Greek varieties. Work more in depth. I believe we are only in the start, in the beginning. We are going to see very beautiful things in the future. Some years ago, I had the opportunity. I have a visit here from the first Australian Asitico, Mr. Berry, Peter Berry. As I told you, at the time I was making a single varietal Asitico, and we had this discussion. And at the end of the day, I was thinking that was, of course, a huge honor for me, but also that is the base of winemaking. You know, people from different aspects exchanging ideas, even if they don't met via the wine, and that's very important. You understand better the variety, better the wine, better your work here this way.
And I think that links back to what you said a little earlier about that friendship between Greek winemakers and that working together and lifting you all up. And so that says to me that the Greek wine future is only going to get brighter. I leave you with one final question, Nikos. When I'm on my next trip back to Greece, and I've got to just look carefully because my mother-in-law is somewhere nearby. And if I tell her I'm eating with anybody but her, there will be trouble. I come to visit you. I drop in at Oenops. What are you giving me to eat? And which of your wines, which wine, which vintage am I drinking with it?
That's a tough question. I would suggest tweet. Drama. It's a place that has different populations in terms of origin. So you're gonna see a mosaic of different tastes, and that's very beautiful about Drama. So I will not suggest something in particular, but I will suggest to explore, and there are many things to explore here. In terms of our wines, that should depend on what we're going to eat, but for me, it will be very interesting, as we are a young winery, to see us both vertically and horizontally, and to understand the philosophy through the years, because that's what is all about for me. It's about philosophy and how we evolve via our work. And you are more than welcome to come, my friend. I will be more than happy to have you in Drama.
My only worry, Nikos, knowing Greek hospitality, is that I would start vertical and end horizontal by the end of things. But it would be a sacrifice I'd be happy to make. Nikos, thank you so much. Your wine comes highly, highly recommended from Yanis, and I'm going to be trying some more of it next week. I did have a little sample last night, and it was a seafood delight. More importantly, though, it's lovely to meet somebody who, in a short space of time, has picked up on a dream late in life, directed it into the world of wine, as you had from chemical engineering, and created what is clearly a brand that's not just very successful, but one that's full of passion, and you've shared that with us today. So, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Nikos. Thank you. Look forward to drinking more of your wine and sharing some together, maybe in South Africa, maybe in Greece, but either way, hopefully soon.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity and the great discussion. Looking forward to meet again.
There we go. Nikos from Oenops Wine. Only been going 2015, first vintage in 2016. A focus on Greek varietals, a focus on sustainability, some old school amphore. But as you can see from that conversation, somebody who not only knows his wine intimately, but also has a real drive to produce wine of the highest quality and to do so part of this greater Greek wine narrative that, as I'm discovering on my travels here, is very much on the up. I've only got 2 more wine shows in Greece on Monday. Still confirming exactly who we're chatting to. I think there might be 1 or 2 Greek winemakers and possibly somebody from Tinos I'm chasing up at the moment. And then next Thursday, we wrap up my time in Greece with Yannis from Vasaltis and his famous Assyrtiko from Santorini, Gary Jordan and Chris Molyneux, both of whom are now growing, and in the case of the Molyneux, producing Assyrtiko in South Africa, and the inestimable Ian Nodir, who is the man bringing that Vasiltis Assyrtiko into South Africa, but who is also producing a Colombard that got 5 stars from John Platter last year, and which makes for a really interesting comparison with the Santorini Assyrtikos. So that is it for today. Huge thank you to Nikos. That's been an enlightening introduction to the wines of northern Greece, of Drama and Macedonia, and the Greek wines that he produces. I've got a glass of Assyrtiko in hand. I'm going to finish this off beside the pool after a long day at the beach and continue to consider tossing it all in and starting a new life as a Greek lifeguard. If I don't do that, I'll be back with you on the show on Monday when I'll be in Athens and talking more Greek wine as a precursor to some stuff we might well see in South Africa in the next few years. This has been Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. A big thank you to Nikos from Oenops Wines, our very special guest on the show today from Greece. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.